Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Streamathon. My name is Luna. You know this. You probably know me best as the head mod of Hermit-a-Day May, but when I'm not reblogging 100 fan arts a day, and also sometimes actively while I am doing that, I am also a voracious fanfiction reader. So I'm really thrilled to have this amazing group of panelists here today. We've got some absolute stars of the Hermitcraft tag on AO3, plus a couple writers whose work may be flying under the radar for now, but all of them are able to weave worlds into their fic that leave you dying to read more. So, let's meet them. Snake, you're first on the slide. Why don't you start us off? Tell us about writing. Tell us about how you got started writing.
Hi, can you hear me? I was tinkering with my volume a little bit. 1 moment, please. I have been writing fic from a very, very young age. I used to write it on the school bus on a laptop that had 1 gigabyte of RAM. That laptop would start having an emotional crisis if I had Chrome and Word open at the same time, by the way. I am very, very quiet, apparently. Justice, can we turn up my volume? Hang on.
Snake, you're just gonna have to talk louder.
Oh lord.
This is a skill issue now.
Oh my god!
Do you really want me to start talking loud? Anyway, no, so I've been writing for most of my life, and yeah, specifically when it comes to fic, I have always had a bit of a penchant for writing really strange things. It's just what comes naturally to me, so yeah.
And we love you for it.
Yeah,
Saber, how about you?
Yeah, hi, me. Hi, I am Saber. Most people in the fandom will know me more as Everett, as is the handle I use both on Tumblr and AO3. I have been writing since very, very young. I published my first book at 16 years old in Portuguese. I only started writing in English for the Hermitcraft fandom what 2-3 years ago, and I have been learning what I do. I am the author who made the Centipede Tangle Tech, the fanfic where I turn Tangle in a bug and I kill him, and also the
very, very normal plot lines on this.
Look, I am here as your local crack writer, okay? My bread and butter is boiled horror and crack treated seriously, okay? I also did write the beginning after the bad ending, also known as that one fic where there's Jarvin. I will not elaborate. But yeah, that's me, hi.
Alright, Zeph and then Johnny.
Oh, I'm going first of us. Okay. Hello.
Yeah.
We're going in order on the slide, sorry.
Scary. Okay. Hi. I'm Zeph Grains, Zeph and I Grains, whatever. I am in this fandom primarily known as co-writer Zeph on the 16th Days account, which belongs to Johnny. When she made her Minecraft YouTube account, I did not make one and just started piggybacking. So I have some stuff that is just mine on there, and we have a lot of collaborations, most notably Hermit Archives, which I think Johnny will talk about more. I started writing fanfiction specifically in middle school on the Redwall Wiki forums, which has a thriving fanfiction community for some reason. That was where I first learned about fandom. And since then, I've been writing since then, and especially since late high school. And when I was in college, I started posting one shot a month at least, and kept that up for a very long time until getting into Minecraft YouTube. And then there was a drought on my main account because everything I was writing was on Johnny's Minecraft YouTube account. But we write a lot together. And a lot of my skill in writing has come from working together with someone who has a complementary but also different style and approach to me. And that influences a lot of what I'm doing with world building and with horror. And we write a lot of horror, we write a lot of character study, we write a lot of very, very stupid, silly shit. Johnny.
Right, and Johnny.
Yeah, I can pick up from there. Yes, hello, I'm Johnny 16th Days. I am probably best well known from the archives, as mentioned. Zeph is my
Ooh.
co-writer who decided that they didn't want to make their own MCYT alt. Like I, buckled up and did when I first got into Minecraft YouTube back in 2000. 2020. Sorry, that was wrong. 2020. It would be interesting if it was 2000 because that's the year I was born. But yeah, I'm 16th Days. I have been writing fanfic since 2012, I think. And I started with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and things have just sort of evolved
God
from
bless.
there. I was an FF.net baby.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I got into so I've been writing for like 13 years now. I've been through a lot of different fandoms. I got into Minecraft YouTube via DSMP, God bless, in 2020. And then into Hermitcraft from there. And yeah, like Zeph said, we write a lot of horror, a lot of character studies. I tend to focus more on like dialogue and character interactions, as you may have noticed from the fact that my most famous fic is entirely dialogue. And yeah, a lot of silly, goofy shit as well.
Fabulous. And last but not least, the inimitable Pixie Mage.
Hi, yeah, I'm Pixie, often Pixie Mage on most platforms, including AO3. I mean, I got into fanfic when I was very, very young. Back when the whole world was super hyped about a certain book about wizards and wizard school. But I remember writing on notebooks first, because goodness, I didn't even have a laptop back then. Back when paper and pencil was like, whoo, powerful. But yeah, I've over the years slipped into video games and other movies, and yeah, done my time in MCU because it's always good stuff. Most recently for Minecraft stuff, I've been more recognizable in the Team Rancher circle of things. I have done a couple things for Hermitcraft. I probably need to get back into Hermitcraft. I've been so life series based the last while. No, but I think the thing that most people notice my stuff for is dialogue, which, I mean, I'm a theater kid. I've kind of learned how to do character voices and stuff pretty well, and that's probably the thing I'm proudest of, is being able to really nail character voices, which is just when I mean, because everybody here is writers, when dialogue really lands, there's just this awesome feeling of like, oh my god, I got it, it's them, they're right there,
yeah.
it's awesome. That's like my favorite. Those, and then the big dramatic moments are my favorite parts of writing ever, are the good dialogue and the moments where everything just kind of explodes out of nowhere into really good plot. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun with it. It's a good time.
All right, fabulous, wonderful to have you all. So let's begin at the beginning. I'd like to start well before the actual writing starts. When we gain our inspiration. In our discussions from before the panel, we chatted about how a fic can start anywhere. You don't need to start with a whole plot in your mind. It can be any single image or single scene or single line of dialogue that starts. So who wants to talk about that first? On that gathering inspiration.
I mean,
I have some notes about this, but I feel like I'm not the best.
Go
one to
ahead.
chat
Go ahead.
Because as I said, guys, I am your local crack writer. Okay, it took me a long time to realize that my fics can and will be considered crack treated serials. Okay, most of my biggest fic inspirations come from fever dreams. Like I have Centipede Tangle Tag is like it's my fic, the one where, as I said, I turned a tangle into a bug and I killed him. There's no better way to explain it. This all happened because I was having a fever, and instead of resting, I went to a local Hermitcraft fan Discord and we started talking headcanons. And some Peter that's in chat talked about I don't remember how we got to bugs headcanons, but I remember just like saying something about Centipede passing out and waking up with the realization, okay, Tangle Tech should become a Centipede. And then I started thinking about the plot, you know. Sometimes the ideas come from nowhere, like something that just escalates and becomes like a really, really big snowball.
I picked
No.
only the most normal authors for this panel.
You had a chance,
what
you
else?
did not pick at me. I was already here.
To be fair, those sorts of things happen. Those ideas can, as I just said, come from anywhere. Snake mentioned the inspiration between the pilot AU was.
Oh god. Alright, so Pilot AU, for those who are unaware, started with an extremely straightforward desire to... Basically, I was looking at some pictures of... Actually, I think I saw a video clip of a couple of pilots in a Pan Am uniform, in like Pan Am pilots uniforms, which if you don't know, look really cool. And I was like, okay, consider, what if Corrales, but he was wearing that? And that is genuinely the entirety of my thought process that led to Pilot AU. There was no further thought on the topic. It was just like, what if I put Corrales in a pilot uniform? Ah, crap, I need to bullshit an excuse for why that is the case. Okay.
And so you start building out that world, that setting from even just a single concept.
The single concept of Corrales should wear a pilot uniform because I think that would look cool. And then you have to expand on it from there to make it make sense. Or I had another fic where idea number one was, what if I gave TFC a railgun, and then I had to contrive a series of reasons why that would be the case.
Yeah.
And then he was a dragon.
And then he was
a good fic.
And then
Everyone should read it.
He was still a robot.
So you have your basic idea. Now let's chat about how to develop that setting. There are two basic options that work a little differently. You can have like something set in canon or like a canon similar setting, and then you have alternate universe settings. So for canon similar settings, you could expect your audience to come into the fic with more knowledge, but also more assumptions about your world. Snake, sorry to keep picking on you, but would you like to start us off talking about this again?
Well, yes, because EHK is that. That is what EHK is. EHK, for those who might not know, is Eldritch Horror Corrales, and it is my series where Corrales is... Guess what? He's a baseball pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays. No, he's an Eldritch Horror. And but it's sort of it's somewhat grounded in canon, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. But the nice thing about that is that, you know, people will come into the fic with various ideas on how it will function, and I don't need to explain anything that I haven't made up. You know, aside from the obvious mechanics of what the actual hell is Corrales and so on and so forth. So the one rule that I have, and this is a personal rule, if any of us mention a rule, you should feel free to ignore it as you see fit. But my single biggest writing rule, especially when it comes to this kind of AU, is you have to explain your bullshit. Now what that means is, you can have anything you want happen, but you do have to explain it at least a little bit, so that the reader has some idea of what's going on and how it functions. You don't need to know the physics of it, but you do need to explain yourself, just a little bit.
Enough to understand how you got from the knowledge you already have about canon to the slight changes we've made for the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, one thing about going canon similar, principally when it's specifically in the context of a Minecraft setting, is that at the same time that we can assume the writer, not the reader, will have a basic knowledge of Minecraft, of Hermitcraft. At the same time, there's a lot of things that we as author tend to adapt to be able to make it in a more quote unquote real scenario, per lack of a better word, you know. So there's always this like, how does elytras work? How does a crafting table work? How does an inventory works? You know, like every author has their own specific ideas and headcanons for it that change setting for setting. So it's the tiny things you need to make it clear how they work if you want to have a more concise story. In my opinion.
Yeah, Pixie was talking about this. Like, how much of the original canon do you keep, and how much do you either mix up or expand upon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
especially with a world like Minecraft. I mean, I've seen some people lean heavily onto the video game vibes of everything is code. People have player code, inventories are digital. Versus people who have a more physical world where, you have a bag for all the stuff you're carrying around. I've seen a mix of both depending on how much you want to do, and you can take inspiration from the game itself, or you can go spiraling into a completely different direction with those same words and concepts to make it more grounded if that's the kind of story you want to tell. And both work really, really well depending on what kind of what your story is, what your plot is. And you can, I've also seen in reference to, servers, sometimes it's a digital space and you jump back to the server hub through a portal like in the game, versus something you could pull from like Hermitcraft Season 8, where every single server is its own planet and you have to leave the planet to get to the next one. Like we saw with the Prometheus and stuff. Like you can pull on those threads and kind of expand a bit. If you want to take it a different direction than people are expecting, if you want to, pull away from the normal video game stereotype a bit, you can totally do that. Both of there's a lot of options out there and a lot of variety in what you can choose to do for your specific world.
Yeah, for sure. Man, the Hermetheus honestly revolutionized. Shout out to that one not quite one-off, but relatively close to one-off storyline from
Yes.
Ren and Doc.
Shout out to Season 8.
Shout out to Season 8.
Iconic.
Yeah, sorry, I got in the fandom Season 7, and I was more active Season 7 and Season 8. I don't think we will ever leave something like Season 8 again, at least in the Hermitcraft fandom.
It's so unique in and of itself. It's delightful.
Yes, it was so crazy. Talk about storytelling.
Oh, I know. The number of amazing stories I've seen just come out of the fact that Tango was up in space on the moon at the end of it all. Like, that alone has spawned so many stories all by itself. And it's just, it's so good. It's so good.
For real. And then we come to the other side of the coin. That's when you decide to use the characters but not the in-game setting. And
hold on, we'll get there. We haven't talked to everyone yet.
Sorry.
I'm so excited to talk about.
I know. We're having a good time here.
We're having a good time here. Zeph and Johnny.
Yes.
What would you like to say about world building based more in canon?
So I left a note in the planning document that said Zeph and Johnny talk about vibes and jokes based world building. So that is what we will do.
This does feel like a good place to jump off into that. Yes.
So here's the thing: you don't actually need to have that much world around your characters. If that's your passion, then by all means, every single detail can be yours and should be yours. But if your story is about something else, if your story is about the characters, if your story is about a theme or a motif, you don't need anything that isn't required by the story. And therefore, your world building can be based primarily on vibes or jokes, which is what we normally do. There's kind of, if we're talking about the like gaminess versus non-gaminess of a Minecraft fic, a lot of the time in 16th Days fics, you'll notice that there's two approaches, kind of. Either it's mainly treated as just a normal physical world and anything Minecrafty isn't mentioned, except as either a sort of meta narrative situation, because there's two stories going on. Because in Minecraft YouTube, there's two stories going on, right? There's the actual story being told in Minecraft, and then there's a story on the player level. And so if we're writing a fic that interacts with that, we'll interact with the game stuff in that meta-narrative sense, where it's like kind of happening on another narrative level. Have you ever read House of Leaves?
Oh gosh.
On the other hand, we can also interact with the Minecraftiness of it all with a joke. Because, Johnny...
Oh god, I feel like I've been called on in class. But yeah, so the thing is that the I guess dissonance between the sort of narratives that we create, which can often be, you know, they can be anything, right? They can be heartfelt, they can be dramatic, they can be serious, they can be sweet. But the dissonance between that and the fact that it's Minecraft is inherently very funny. It just is. Like, anyone who's ever like showed a friend who is not into MCYT a very serious scene will understand what I'm talking about, right? Because you look at it and you go, this is Minecraft. And so when you're writing fic, you have the power to sort of invoke that feeling intentionally for a punchline, where you can write. Basically, it's kind of like you see this a lot in, like, this is going to be sort of a weird comparison maybe, but like Tolkien books, he does this thing where he switches between high and low register, where you'll have like a very serious and dramatic line, and then you'll have a character saying, well, I don't want to do that. And you can have a similar thing where you were writing your story on the, like, I guess the more serious and narrative level, and then you can remind your reader that this is Minecraft. With just a little bit, like, you know, God, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, you know, items are blocks. Pick up a couple blocks, put them in your pocket. They turn little when you do that.
Mumbo Jumbo threw a whole cubic meter of bricks through XP's window.
Exactly. Yeah, like that. And so it's like an opportunity that you have specifically with Minecraft YouTube is to play with that dissonance between the story that you're constructing and the like medium in which it's taking place.
For sure.
One thing about writing Minecraft YouTubers specifically is that one thing or not, like Minecraft YouTube, at least in the Hermitcraft, I know there's like other corners of MCYT that this may not be the rule. Comedy, being funny is the base of the video.
It's the background. Oh yeah, 100%.
Adults being silly on Minecraft, and we can push angles of that. Obviously, we can. I have been doing this for 3 years, you know. But it's really hard. Like, it's really hard to keep on character writing and to not crack a joke, to not do something funny. Because one thing or not, our exposure to these characters will always be the funny part. Will always be the jokes, the crack, you know. So
especially
there's
when
like
you're
this balance, I feel like.
You were gonna say, especially when you're
especially when you're dealing with people who have such funny and quirky dialogue, like catchphrases and stuff. Like, try writing God, Tango Tech, Corrales, they have such quirky things they say normally on a normal daily basis, and try to write a serious scene with that. It doesn't always land. You have to
I have done that, and it is like trying to parallel park a jump jet.
Yeah.
No,
What an odd series of words!
Yeah, let's
It is
drop
like
an ificate into the middle of a crying scene. You can't. Yes.
True!
Corellis making horrible jokes in the middle of a
Yeah.
serious scene.
Yes.
Like that is.
Can I cut in for a second? Sorry.
Yeah.
Just I wanted to really quickly, because I've realized that the point that Johnny and I were making can be a little bit obtuse. If you don't have the exact set of brains we have. I wanted to really quickly define world building.
Sure.
Because
that would have been a good place to start with this panel, actually. My bad.
Wario.
Yeah. That might have.
because the thing is that world building, I mean, the popular definition is like world that you create out of your brain for a story. But in more technical terms, world building is just where the characters are and your ability as a writer to build that out around them. And so any setting description, anything that indicates setting, anything that indicates the nature of the place and the nature of the setting and the nature of the conceptual environment around the character is itself world building.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of what Johnny and I were trying to say is that with fan fiction, a lot of the time you can leave things in the world building up to the minds of the reader who already know the canon, and just drop in little reminders or indications of that when it becomes relevant, especially if you're working in canon Minecraft-y settings.
Yeah. That
talk-
actually leads us neatly to our next point. Sorry to cut anyone off, but that does lead us neatly to our next point, that we have then the other side of the coin with alternate universe fics, where everything is not already set out in front of you, and all we know are the characters. Seth, you wanted to keep talking about that?
I suppose I can. Actually, I hysterically, despite my involvement with From the Archives, which is, for those unaware, a Magnus Archives fusion crossover situation thing. Hermitcraft characters in the Magnus Archives story. And then a bunch of offshoots, which are Hermitcraft characters in a different Magnus Archives story. But the thing is, I'm actually mostly a missing scene and character study writer on my own time. So I bring a lot of that to when I'm doing an AU. What was I saying? I'm sorry. Hey, Johnny, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can. I will stop watching you flounder and pick this up. Yeah. So I guess one thing about the difference between writing in like your standard, like quote unquote canon settings, right, is that and writing like a full AU is that all of your readers will be coming to a canon setting with basically their own version of what it will look like, right? Like anyone who's reading like Minecraft fan fiction has generally their own sort of mental picture already of like what they imagine a more sort of realistic version of that world to look like. And so if you don't really say anything, they'll just apply that to your story if it's just like an interaction between two characters, right? And then it doesn't really feel like anything is missing. But with an AU, like a proper, like we're in a different universe now, your readers aren't coming into it already like with a vision of what the world looks like. You need to supply that, even if it's just telling them that, like, because the From the Archives is not set in like a completely different world. What it's set in modern Britain, like the Magnus Archives is. It's set in a slightly more spooky and eldritch version of a place in the real world. I'm not British, so a couple times I did get corrected later by British voice actors on wording choices and stuff, which was a little funny. But in that case, it's all about adaptation. Like, it's in figuring out where to place the characters and how to adapt them in ways that make sense for the new world that they're in, but also make sense for who they are as people, or for how you are wanting to characterize them. So like in the case of From the Archives, the thing that was like the most fun was in finding that, I guess, balance between fitting the characters into the world in a way that was like effective and fun for the story, like for the different story that I wanted to tell, but that also still made sense and like kept them recognizable as the characters that, you know, because people are reading the fic because they want to see the characters, right? So it's important to keep them recognizable outside of their context while still having them make sense in the new context. It's like it's kind of a delicate balancing act. But like, at least in cases like that, like From the Archives, so much of the world building just relies on convincing the audience that the characters can exist in the space that they're in, like making it make sense that they're there and they exist in the way that they do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, that conveniently brings us back to Pixie. Obviously, with a crossover, like From the Archives, you're setting it in Magnus Archives Britain, so people who listen to the Magnus Archives already are a little extra clued in to what's happening there. That's crossovers, obviously, very important part of alternate universe fanfiction. Versus sort of alternate universes that you just create from your brain. But first, let's talk a little bit more about that drawing from other media, Pixie.
Yeah, so because I have tampered a bit with the building more original universe type stuff than crossover. I have a universe that I've been affectionately calling the Mage-bound verse, which is witches and familiars and mages, and it feels almost like a modern fantasy-ish setting. It's a weird balance, but because that involved building some kind of magic system and a world around it, you don't have to come up with every single thing right off the top of your head. You can pull from things you're familiar with. Like some of the spells and the magic that I'm working with comes from other magic-based media. And I know a lot of the world-building aspect as far as the way society is built and the magic version of technology is pulled from an anime called Fairy Tail that I've watched for years. Like you can pull on different threads that you find in other worlds to create something new. Like I know that I've been using like restructured Latin words for some of the spells, which is something that I might have learned from, things like Harry Potter growing up, but I can make it my own by melding it with bits from other things. I've been using, like shows, books, TV shows, even, goodness, if you get inspiration from a song, if it's got something that you can pull on to try to make something new of your own. Everything is inspired by something. So you don't have to force yourself to come up with everything out of dust from the back of your brain if that's not something that you want to do. But you can always pull inspiration from somewhere else. Some of that obviously can come from. Sorry.
I was just going to say that absolutely is a good way to balance. Instead of doing a full crossover or creating things all from scratch, there is nothing original in the world. Everything is copying everything else. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Absolutely. And even with the versions of the characters that I'm putting in, I'm still pulling on bits of Minecraft stuff. Like I still have people like Jimmy and Grian being avians, like a lot of the stuff you see in the base Minecraft fandom stuff. And I've still got references to the Nether and Withers, even though this is a completely different world. You just get there a different way, or it means something slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing about creating things for a fandom, be it fanfic, as is the theme of this pain, or even like fan art, or just like a simple headcanon. Fandom feeds from fandom. It's okay if you see something really, really cool, and you just decide, okay, I want this. I want to use this, and you turn it to yourself. I have an AU. I never published anything, just some Tumblr posts here and there. for the handcraft that I call Weapon AU. That the entire concept of Weapon AU started because I freaking love Soul Eater. I love Soul Eater so much. I love the concept of people turning it into weapons. Okay, I do not like the soul concept of Soul Eater.
You're taking one premise, and you don't need the rest of that. You have your premise that you want.
I was just like, okay, Soul Eater, people turn into weapons. They eat souls, but they don't care about that part. Okay, now all the hermits turn into weapons. You know, and I went insane over that. I have a lot of whips and things that not published fic that I should probably publish it someday.
Do it.
But like, who wants to see Javin take a brick to the head? Anyway.
It would just go right through him. It's fine.
Yeah. You're good.
I wanted to add a little something to this. And speaking of unpublished stuff, I'm going to be referencing a current project that I'm working on that about 3 people have seen, which are Pete, I think Saber a little bit, and one other person. So another thing you can do, you absolutely remix media, like remix things that you've seen in the past. But another aspect is research. Now, a lot of people know that I do a lot of research when I make things. I usually when I was writing Eldritch Horror Corrales, I had a tab open that was just the timeline of the far future. You scrolled right down to like protons decaying and stuff. And I was just constantly referencing from that because I needed it all the time. So doing research into like science and history and the way things work in the real world can be a really useful starting point to like ground your world building, because you can have fantastical stuff, all kinds of crazy crap, but the world is also a big, wild, crazy place, and there's all sorts of cool shit that you can learn when you pull your research into it. And so the thing I'm working on currently that is a good example, and really hoping I can get it published in the next little while, the central premise is Dante's Inferno. I'm going somewhere with this.
That one.
But if you looked into the Inferno, you'll know that like a lot of the different rings have really wild and crazy environments. And I sat down and I thought, like, you know, the wind tunnel. Go in the wind tunnel for eternity. And it's like, that's really cool. But what would species that evolved under those conditions look like? You know? So I use that as a jumping off point for a bunch of really interesting research and like considering speculative biology and that sort of thing. So you can really combine, I don't know, you can combine research into the real world with more fantastical elements to create something really unique. I mean, there is nothing new under the sun, but you know.
Right.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Like, as much as you can steal from different things, as much as you want, they do all need to connect. And that, I love this. This brings us into our next point very neatly. One thing I personally struggle with in my writing is determining how much detail to include. It can be really easy to get caught up in a couple little details, or to like forget like entire like portions of we're gonna pretend we know how that works. So like how do you strike that balance? And I think determining what you're researching and what you're looking into is very important for that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did
the Google Doc.
I did expect Snake to keep talking. Sorry.
Sorry. I just violently flashed back to the smoke detectors in Pilot AU.
Oh my god.
Everything in Pilot AU.
But specifically the smoke detectors, because I had a bit of a mental breakdown about those, because for those unaware, some smoke detectors use a button of a man-made element called americium, encased in gold foil to detect smoke. Except in Pilot AU, the world building is that they don't have nuclear anything, actually. They went down the biology side of the tech tree.
Ooh.
So I spent an entire afternoon having a small mental breakdown about smoke detectors. Don't do that. That would be my
Don't do
thought.
that!
Don't do that. It's
Oh,
okay.
no.
You can have
Yes.
smoke detectors.
You
To be
can just
honest,
leave.
About the tales,
Yeah.
I think about world building to me is that world building is not something that's purely for like obviously it's for you, but like not purely for the person reading. I see the world building of a story more as a shadow rule that you follow when you are telling the story, like preset things in your world that determines how the character acts, where the character goes, how certain things
Mhm.
work, you know. So when you are writing a story, it's that phrase I told y'all sometimes when we're like discussing this panel, that of show don't tell, but also don't show. You don't need to tell the reader all the details, all the things that happens in your world building. You know, it's a lot of like write your story and try to measure how much does the reader needs to know, how much you need to tell and show the reader so they are able to enjoy the story properly, you know. Like sometimes even writing a character doing something confidently is already enough to a point you don't need to explain everything for why are they doing that, you know.
That makes sense because clearly they know what they're doing. So why
Yes.
would we
Oh,
need to know what they're
absolutely, yeah.
doing?
Like
The
an
character you're writing
example.
lives there. Yeah.
Yes, an example for this, I'm pulling this from other fandom, but like an example from this is like your character lives in a post-apocalyptic world where there's this illness that affects people, and one of the ways you can see if the person has an illness is if the palm of their hands are yellow or not. So every time the character goes to establishment, he has to present himself and put his hands up to show they are not yellow. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to explain all this context. The viewer probably already knows the characters in a post-apocalyptic world. Like if you write this right, just like he the act of like, oh, he puts his hands up, showing that they are not yellow. The person checks and let him passes. You know, it already implies there's something there, that this is a common way of doing stuff in this world. You do not necessarily need to explain all the world building behind of why the fact if the character's hands are yellow or not is important. You know.
Yeah, and if it's important, those explanations will come up further in the story.
Yeah. In a natural, like, yeah, built-in way that just naturally flows with everything else that's going on.
Absolutely.
Um,
I was just gonna say that.
Yay! Okay.
Go. Go.
Hi. So here's the thing. I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but if you don't care about something, it doesn't have to be in your story.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with fanfiction. The thing about fanfiction is that, as we were talking about in the canon era, in the canon similar discussion, the reader already comes in knowing a lot about the characters, about the world, about their prior assumptions. They probably have fandom experience. If you mention that someone has wings, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. This character usually has wings. That's fine. I don't need to go into that." If your passion is the world building, then the story can be about the world building. It can be about whatever you want. It's fan fiction. We write this for fun. Nobody is paying you. Have the time of your life. But if you don't care about that, you also don't need to feel obligated to put it in. Because, I mean, if your story's about world building, then yes, the world building. If your story is about a theme or a motif or a character, then the story should be about that character, and anything else you put in can be something you find interesting or something you find fun or something that is indulgent for you, because this is fan fiction and you are here to have a good time. But you don't need to put in any of the other things. I know a lot of the time I build my stories around kind of a central vibe or a central motif. And anything outside of that is irrelevant. I wrote this fic. No, that's irrelevant. We don't need to talk about
Go
that.
on. Go on.
Okay, fine. So I have this fic that I really, really love still about Witchcraft Cleo from Witchcraft SMP, which you should watch if you haven't, by the way. It's really excellent, and Cleo's series is only 6 episodes long. And the whole that is technically a world building focused fic because it's a lot about how the magic system works there. But in principle, I go very little into the actual mechanisms of the magic system, just like a few central phrases that repeat throughout the fic, because it's actually a character study, and all of the world building is serving the character study. So everything in a story has to serve the central point of the story or the central focus of the story. I say has to. It doesn't have to. You can do whatever you want forever. But that's how I approach storytelling. So all the world building that isn't relevant becomes implied in the background or left for the reader to assume. And then you end up with kind of a richness of imagery and vibes, but not that much actual fact. Which is how I like to tell my stories. I'm a big fan of soft magic systems and whatnot. But it also is not how everyone likes to tell their stories, and that is also totally fine. This is just an option.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. There's a couple more points that we covered in the document that didn't quite get scripted, but I do want to bring them up. Such as oh shoot, what was I about to say? Adapting. Oh, what was it? Well, this is awkward. Here we go. Adapting dialogue. Thank you, Pixie.
What's that? I was just looking through notes.
adapting dialogue to fit your world was a cool thing that got brought up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, because this is one that I have seen used already in the base Minecraft universes, even if you're not spiraling off into AU type territory, where you'll see people who will say, "Oh my void," or they'll use specific terminology because that's
Or
the
the
world they're
devs.
in. They'll talk about the game devs as being something to a but terminology, language, how you can have certain phrases be part of the normal lingo of the world that you've built if you want to add a little flavor to depth of characters, or how some things are talked about casually, some things aren't. You can emphasize how common or uncommon something is in your story or in your world just by the way that people talk about it, or how many people know about it, or just the way that people talk, or the casualness of actions and habits and that kind of thing. And I know,
that use of dialogue to indicate just simple little side details about the world is so powerful. And sometimes people get caught up in oh, well, the streamer doesn't say "oh void," so why should I say it?
Yeah.
Which is a valid interpretation, but I do think there's such power in that, in using those little incidental pieces of dialogue.
It's built into the world. It just adds another little layer of frosting on top of the cake.
Absolutely.
Just a little extra.
We have yet to discuss
oh gosh.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh my god, there's also
in this script document, there's a 26 one line of text that is size 26, and it says Nashville, Tennessee.
Importance, yes. There's
and I think this is a great example of one of those things that is often it's used to characterize Mr. Joe Hills. Without a full explanation behind it, and that's okay. Let's talk about that more.
Yes. I just want before we go for real in this in the Nashville. I was trying to find one of the best quotes I ever saw in a fanfic. That's actually snakes. Because of the topic of like adapting language. I'll never forget. For the love of Jeb's ponytail.
Oh god.
It's still.
Okay.
That's funny.
Back on topic, Nashville,
Yes.
Tennessee. Adapting a piece of dialogue that Joe Hills uses day to
All the
day
time. Yeah.
into
Yes.
your new stories, into your new worlds.
This is, I think, where the differences in philosophies of world building become very, very clear between us, because some people, we were talking about this a little bit pre-stream, so I'll let everyone kind of say their own takes. But I mean, for me and Johnny, it's just an offhand reference. Yes, it's Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. We don't need to explain this. It can be a jarring joke, or it can just be part of his general vibe. He's from Nashville, Tennessee. It doesn't matter how we get there. What does that mean? Who cares? Moving on.
Yeah, you can treat it exactly like that. No, nobody will bat an eye at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas other people.
So I just saw an image of Nashville, Tennessee flash on the screen for a second.
Yeah.
Does one of those other people want to make themselves known?
Yes.
Sure.
Nashville, Tennessee. This ties with my entire world building, with the fact that the Minecraft world is a parallel world going at the same time as the real world. So in my world building, Joe Hill simply is able to go to Nashville, Tennessee. Like he can get out of Minecraft and go specifically to Nashville, Tennessee. He can go back and forth from Nashville, Tennessee, and that's all.
I know I've just kind of tapped it as like it's just a place on another server that he was on before Hermitcraft. For me, it's just let's make it simple. The same way that Scots Major is Scottish, but Scotland is a place on Earth SMP, so it technically exists. Like it's just another server. People calling the English language English, even though England could potentially not exist. But I'm like, it's just another place from the far history of Minecraft. It's just another place that just isn't the same England that we know. Like that tends to be the way that like my middle ground of it.
I feel like this is such a like useful microcosm to like see how different people like approach this same like world building differently. Like, you know, Saber making it like a potentially plot relevant bit, but still a bit, versus Steph and Johnny going, yep. Yeah. You want to ask us more about it? You want to go there? Versus, like, personally, I really do my best to like incorporate those weird esoteric details. Like Pixie said, using whatever methods is available to make it make sense.
I've also seen like, some people. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I feel like this is also a good example of like I was talking a little bit earlier about how there's a lot of comedic potential in playing on the dissonance between the story that you're telling and the fact that it's Minecraft. And in a similar way, there's a lot of fun that can be had with like playing with the meta nature of the story, right? Like I'm trying to remember. I don't remember which fic it was, but there was a fic I read where there was a dialogue exchange where someone mentions like I think it's a bicycle, and the other person they're talking to is like, bicycles aren't real. And it made me laugh so hard because I'm like, oh yeah, it's it's Minecraft. Bicycles are not real. And it's just fun to like.
Okay, I know I've had a moment like that where I'm doing the reader's vote on the outcome type story where Season 8 Tango and his rocket ship crashes onto empires, and they don't know what a rocket ship is. They're like, that's from a kid's storybook. That doesn't exist. What do you mean you flew here in a rocket ship? Those aren't real. What are you talking about? He's like, are you an alien? I'm like, no, I just had a rocket ship from another planet. It's fine.
I'm
This,
fascinated by the
reminds
concept
me-
of it somehow made it into children's books without being a real
Yeah.
thing.
No, I
For
know.
real.
Anyway,
This
Sab,
reminds me of
Sapphire.
a fic I read some time ago, Lucky Jumbo, my beloved. It's a Inscription Minecraft crossover.
Ooh.
Whereas the protagonist of the Inscription ARG is teleported, is isekai'd to Hermitcraft. And there's this piece of dialogue when he's following Pearl around. That's basically in the lines of, so, you are Australian? And Pearl is like, yeah, I am Australian. So you are from Australia? And she's like, what's Australia?
Yeah, it's like I don't know what that is.
Yeah!
That's delightful.
I
No, I
love
love that
style.
counterbalance of having to
I-
balance out what makes sense and what doesn't. Some people saying like, "Oh, you speak English?" It's like, "What the hell is English? I speak Common. What are you talking about?" Like that kind of stuff is just, it's great. It's
I
so
have
good.
Also,
a-
Snake did not talk about her Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention. So, the rule I mentioned earlier, the you have to explain your bullshit. This is a great example of an exception to that.
Well, you
because-
don't.
Yeah, there are a lot of times where it's just a good idea to not explain your bullshit. And my approach to the whole Nashville question is simple. Joe Hills has not lied a single time since anyone met him. When Joe says, "I am from Nashville, Tennessee," he is telling the truth. Nashville does not exist.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It does not exist. End of discussion.
I know one of them joking. I don't remember who said it when we were talking, but the person who said that from Nashville, Tennessee is just part of his name. Like it's not a place; it's just part of Joe Hill's name. It's like his middle name or last name or something. World building.
World building.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
There is also-
Yes.
There is also a
sorry.
note in here about what you're focusing on varies also based on the genre you're in, because like
Oh, yeah.
it's all great fun to make Nashville, Tennessee just like a bit, but if you're writing a horror fic, you're probably
yeah.
not bringing that up as a joke. Like,
Mhm.
or at all.
Incorrect. I absolutely would.
Yeah, incorrect.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
I am in a call for horror writers.
Oh my
Yeah.
I
don't.
think it literally is a joke and from the archives. I would have to go back and look.
That's funny.
But the thing about horror specifically is that it doesn't function if there isn't also comedy. Horror is inherently really funny.
Yeah. It's a
If
bit
you look at a horror concept without the vibes attached, hysterical. What is that?
Yeah. No, you're correct. You're correct.
And genuinely, one of the philosophies of writing, both from the archives and basically any horror Johnny and I do, except maybe very short, focused stuff, is that there has to be an element of comedy as well, especially when the hermits are involved.
That is true.
Because there can't really. This is an opinionated take. But I find it very difficult to write the hermits specifically without an element of comedy.
Yes.
The characterization is much harder, and everything just doesn't cohere as well without the element of comedy, because comedy is so foundational, as we were talking about earlier, to hermitcraft.
Yeah, like the way that they characterize themselves on camera
Oh, yeah.
is intended to be funny. It's full of jokes, and I think if you remove those, then it's a lot harder to make sure that they're recognizable as a character.
Yeah, even when they're doing plot lines that are wars or oh my god, the world's gonna end, everybody's being funny about it. They start a cult because the moon is big. Like there's a level of absurdity with the stuff that they do, even when they're trying to tell a semi-serious story, that you can't take them seriously. That's part of the process for their characterization. They can't be fully serious or they're
Like-
not themselves.
The hermits, the problem is, even when they are miserable, they are cracking jokes.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like I am the person who wrote I really probably the most angst thing I ever wrote is a fic where all the hermits, with exception of XB and Jevin, perma-die in the end of season 8. Okay,
Dang.
I wrote that level of fic. I am unable. While I was
Dang.
writing that I was unable to do stuff. There was not one chapter without a joke. There was not one chapter without
Yeah.
a comedic break. Because we need this. I feel like angst, horror, works better when there is joy in the middle.
Yeah.
This is
Because
Absolutely.
it gets to some point where it gets cathartic. It
Well,
gets
'cause I
to
know-
some point where suffering gets cathartic. And I understand there's people that
Mhm.
consume specifically this type of media. But with the hermits specific, it's really hard to do this type of catharsis work, you know.
Well, I will say, and this is less of a world building, more of a general storytelling rule. In general, if you're writing a story that is heavy in darker subjects, without those high notes, the low notes don't hit as hard. So putting those bits of comedy makes the bad parts worse for the sake of the story, and it works really, really well. So that kind of thing actually ends up fitting in pretty well with the hermits, just by sheer coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It just makes for better storytelling.
I may be misremembering the play, but if I recall correctly, I think it's Macbeth that has just a random drunk porter or a night guard just wandering around being silly goofy, because
Don't remember.
I don't
I've
remember
seen
which
Mackers and I can't remember.
I don't remember which play, but it is definitely Shakespeare. I have
Yes,
definitely
yes.
seen- Yeah, anyway,
Every
I mean,
single one of his shows does that. Yeah.
yeah, but you gotta have the other thing is when you've established a joke, and if you're writing something horrifying, you can actually turn that joke around and add it and use it as an extra cudgel to
Ooh,
whack the
yes.
reader with. I did that in EHK. There's an early EHK fic where Corrales is making horrible jokes to try and ease the tension, and then much later in the series, he makes even more horrible jokes for the express purpose of, and the second time around he's doing it purely out of defiance, more or less. He's doing it to be an asshole. The first time he was trying to be kind and polite, and the second time he's like, no, it was. So you can actually use the humor to turn around and add more spice to certain scenes, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely agreed 100%. Am I muted? No, I'm not.
No, you're
Great.
not. You're here.
I've been muting myself intermittently, so I wasn't sure. But coming back around to genre, one of the things I think about a lot when writing, and I think that does and can influence world building if we define world building as we did earlier, as the setting and conceptual space around the characters, is genre, and is the effect the genre that characters carry with them. One thing that Johnny and I do sometimes, and that have been is basically assign certain characters certain genres and have those genres come into contact with each other. And from the archives, which I'm going to use as an example, there's an unwritten rule that the Empire's characters are having a terrible time, and the Hermitcraft characters are having a great time. This is because the different genres in their source materials allow for that. Like Empire's is much more story-focused, tragedy, etc., whereas Hermitcraft is funny, and those characters can't be separated from that comedy and from that having fun with the atrocities. So therefore, all the Empire's characters are miserable, and all the Hermitcraft characters are having a great time being little monsters. And that's kind of how it maintains its balance as a horror comedy.
Yeah.
And I think thinking about genre as a force of the setting and as a force of the narrative can be a really fun characterization tool.
I'm going to step in here. Folks in chat, if you want to start posting questions, we'll be spending a few more minutes chatting amongst ourselves here, and then we're going to start taking questions. So, yeah, any questions you have for our panelists, let us know. All right, thank you. Was there anything else I wanted to cover?
I didn't bring this up in the prior call, but I did have a thought about perspective and how you describe the setting of a place based on the perspective of the character and the story you're doing.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, obviously there's the reliable narrator, where you tell the setting of where the character is and what sets the scene and everything from a very factual or descriptive standpoint, and that's most used in writing. But you can also, I mean, depending on the genre, you can also play around with very biased world description, world explanation type stuff. Where if you have a character who believes a certain thing or thinks a certain way, that may skew the lens through which you're telling about the world that they're in. Which I know I've seen that done with characters who are more morally gray or who have specific ideologies or something, where they may see the world slightly differently, but then if you were to switch to a different POV, all of a sudden that whole setting that you've set up can shift gears like 2 notches to the left, and you see more to it than was there before. Like, you can absolutely play around with that kind of thing too, if you are writing something that changes perspective like that. It's a lot of fun to play around with, actually.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. That point of view, how people are looking at the world makes a huge difference in what details they're noticing, and that can really guide your writing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because the one that I'm doing that's the readers vote on everything are switching back and forth between, because it's taking kind of during the Herm-Pyres crossover era. On one side, you've got Jimmy or one of the other emperors who know the world, know how it works, they're familiar with how everything functions, versus Tango or one of the other hermits would look at this all as completely different. I mean, we saw it during the actual canon crossover where they were like, what do you mean you don't have like an economy like ours? What are you talking about? Trying to understand a place you're not familiar with, you're going to end up describing more of the things that other people might not notice. Like, you'll notice the weather's different, or the buildings are different, or whatever, versus someone who's lived there forever might not describe that as they're walking around town. So it's a fun thread you can pull on to do something a little, like, if you wanted to try something new, if you haven't done that before, it's fun to play around with.
All right. Well, thank you. We have a couple questions coming in. I'm going to start with actually the last one we got here. Was in pick a fic you've written. What was one of the hardest blocks or plot holes you had to overcome?
Oh, I have one.
All right, Saber seems ready.
Impulse's horns. My
Okay.
Impulse is a demon. My Impulse does not have horns. I never described Impulse with horns, but I always visualized him with horns. And I got to a point where in the fanfic where I realized I described him at least 3 times. And I never talked about horns. And so I have been spinning this. Like, I spin it that next chapter so many times thinking, should I go back and describe? Should I just describe now? Should I just not give him horns and suck it up? I was way too conflicted about the fact if the guy had horns or no, okay? So, sometimes, guys, when you are like, the thing is that we're talking about, like, people we already kind of know how the character is, so I leaned way too heavy in the fact that most people, when you talk about like the demon Impulse headcanon, people already draw him with horns, you know.
Yeah.
But I got to this point that was like rereading my stuff. I was like, I never talked about his horns.
You were actually leaning too hard on that assumption.
Yeah.
I can see how that could be a pitfall for sure. Johnny, what about you?
Yeah, so one issue that I ran into when I was writing from the archives is that it started out as, I didn't start out planning to make it a big overarching story that it eventually became. I just started out writing basically one-shots that were set in this universe as the inspiration struck me. And then I dropped a bunch of I guess plot hooks in those early fics that I eventually was able to circle back to and pick up again, but I didn't plan it cohesively from the start. And once I got I think between 5 and 10 chapters in, basically, that started causing me some problems because I there were some things that were important to the setup that I had not. I realized that I hadn't stated clearly enough. I had sort of mentioned them offhandedly, but in a way that I realized relied too much on knowledge of the crossover. Like it relied too much on having prior knowledge of the Magnus archives in order to understand what had happened. So like the main thing is that I had Etho as the prior archivist, and he had disappeared in the same way that Gertrude had in canon. But I had not made that sufficiently clear, and so people in the comments started getting really confused about it when he was mentioned sort of offhandedly. And so what I wound up doing, and I was able to do this because the fic was all basically in a series of one-shots, was I went back and I wrote basically a prologue.
There you go.
Which is now the first fic series. It's test recording 1, 2, 3, and it's literally just stating outright a bunch of the stuff that I had in my head from the start that I didn't write down because I was relying too much on just sort of assuming that people would figure it out when that wasn't really fair to the readers. And now I think it reads much more cohesively because I went back and I added that onto the start.
I can definitely see how that happens too. First of all, when you're writing crossovers, sometimes you do expect people to know both properties. But also, like, if sometimes you have a story idea, and if you don't get that story idea out of you, you will simply perish. And there is no time for things like sitting down and working out train schedules or whatever. Does anyone else have an example they want to offer for this question, or should we move on?
Oh goodness. I do know there was one that I still have to finish this. That was, well, I started writing it a couple days before the Hermit Empire crossover even happened. But they all go over to empires, and the emperors believe they are the characters they're portraying. They don't remember anything outside of that server. And I had a very specific idea of what the problem was and the solution to it when I first started writing it. Fast forward about a month, and I realized it was a really bad idea and didn't make any sense. And I had already gotten in 3 chapters. And so I was like, because I had started finally watching Empire Season 2 because I hadn't watched it yet. And I was watching it, and I'm like, okay, this wouldn't make any damn sense. And I had to sit there for like a week trying to figure out a better solution that would still fit in with what I'd already written that I could foreshadow. I actually came up with something that was inspired by Doctor Who, hilariously enough. But when I finally settled on it, I was like frantically going back through my other writing, like, okay, did I ever do anything that would mess with this? Would this not work if I decided to change this? Oh my god.
Yeah.
So yeah, latent changes in plot are an interesting thing to have to figure out.
Happens to the best of us.
Oh yeah.
All right. Another question from Trees, who is struggling with description, specifically when it comes to like environments and vibes.
I have one.
So talk through how you do your description. Yes.
All right. I have one. I'm a very descriptive writer. And to me, one of the most important things about description isn't actually the description at all. It's the cadence of the sentences and the paragraphs. The actual grammar and structure of your writing is going to do so much for how your description reads and how the energy of your writing and the energy you're trying to convey. Almost more than the actual word. I mean, obviously the actual words also affect it, but like the sounds in the words, the cadence of the sentences, the length and rhythm of the sentences, the length and rhythm of the paragraphs, varying the length of your paragraphs. If you do long sentences, the reader gets lulled a little bit. If you use a lot of repetition, you set up a rhythm that you can then break. If you use short sentences, you're boom, 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 but you can't do that too much because then the eye skips. A lot of what I would find really helpful in this case is literally just reading your writing out loud and seeing how it feels on your tongue, and reading it like in your head and seeing how, like, where your mental voice skips, where your mental voice lingers. And a lot that will do a lot for the quality of the vibes you are conjuring, in my opinion. I'm also insane about this, though, as Johnny can attest for editing. So, I have a habit of spending like a week on the exact cadence of one sentence that I don't like.
No.
Been there,
So,
done that.
you know,
Yeah,
take this advice with a grain of salt, but
there is a balance to strike here. It is fairly common for Zeph to send me 2 or 3 versions of the same sentence and be like, which of these reads better? And I'm like, this is the same. This is the same.
Oh no.
Lord.
For me, the person.
that being
Sometimes I
said,
have.
Oh.
Johnny, you go.
oh sorry, I was just gonna say that like for description, especially when it comes to horror, I think one of the strongest things that you can do to be like to create evocative imagery is like unusual unusual comparisons. Like, you know, there's some similes and metaphors that are very common, that are kind of like stock, that you use in your language without even really thinking about it. And I'm trying to think of examples, and my mind is like blank right now. But like,
As white as snow.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Cunning
yeah,
as
yeah.
a fox.
As white as snow, as black as a starless night, as that sort of thing, like very standard comparisons, and those are fine. But it's like the more unexpected you are with, especially like your metaphors and similes, and like
Oh, I have
your word choice, then the more vivid and evocative you can be. Like yeah, you can be something can be white as snow, but it can also be white as like sun bleached bone, right? It can also
Ooh,
be
yeah.
right as what's something else? It can also be white as the
Landlord
sun. Yeah, it could like you can do like, I would challenge you to choose more unusual words and more unusual comparisons. Like, I don't know. I was
Yeah.
recently reading a book where a character's, I'm sorry, I'm gonna say gore warning. But since we're talking about horror, I guess maybe you guys like, I just brace for that. But I was recently reading a book where, after digging through rock for a long time, a character's fingers were described as wet sticks.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, that's a good
Ooh,
description.
ow.
Oh,
So like,
specific.
get weird with it, and that's
Get
the
weird
sort
with
of
it.
thing that will really put like a vivid image in your reader's mind and like stick with them. That's my advice.
I mean, to
Sad.
expand on that, you can absolutely use that in the other direction too, where if you're using a descriptor with a certain mood to it, like you can describe the calluses on someone's hands as being rough or, you know, unsightly, versus having it be, you know, familiar because of, I don't know, like you can make it complimentary or you can make it not so, and that can change the vibe of the sentence. Well, like you said, you could do white as, yeah, bone, I guess, or white as snowdrop petals, and it's a completely different shift of the vibe and the mood. So you can go
Fab,
both
did you have
ways with
something
that.
as well?
To be honest, I am not the best person at the descriptions. I am good at writing body horror descriptions, and that's it. But I'm not good with environmental descriptions. I just wanted to tap in the fandom-related descriptions. Like, sometimes you can describe something and put something from the fandom to describe something. I have had like times where describing I described a mattress. I don't remember the exact wording, but it looked like I jamming a rolled in that mattress in the night because it
Jeez
was
Louise.
wet and blue.
I hate how evocative that is.
Yes.
That's awful.
But yeah,
But also,
And it works.
the phrase I put in the Discord, he spoke with the anger of a sleep-deprived B-dubs, you know. It like it hooks something to someone that is already in the fandom, you know. Like
That's true. That really like I feel like serves to deepen like the connection, like the reminder that this is the world
yeah,
you're in.
Mhm. As
it's
chilled as the
it's
void,
always
or yeah.
yes, always lovely to read a fanfic, and there's like these tiny hooks, these tiny comparisons and details and examples that shows you that the person writing it really does care about the fandom. Like really is there, watch that, saw that, is on the fandom jokes, you know. So I feel
Yeah.
like putting these little quips sometimes here, sometimes there is also a really good thing when you are in a fandom related setting of
Mhm.
writing.
Professor Gallifrey and chat. Oh, go ahead, Snake. Sorry.
I have an approach which probably isn't the best approach for other people. Like, my general approach when it comes to like writing descriptions of stuff is to try and. Oftentimes, I have a very clear mental picture of what what I want the scene to look like, what I can see in my head, and
yeah.
my approach is often to just. This is going to sound weird. Basically, my keyboard is a brush, and I am trying to paint you a word picture because drawing is hard and takes forever. So
Yes. No, I feel that 100%.
I really want to set the scene and make it, make it vivid, right? Especially when you've got really strange or alien creatures or designs or, all kinds of weird stuff happening, things that people wouldn't have a frame of reference for in the real world. You do need to. I like to really try and set people up so that they have a good description of what crazy shit I've conjured, and they can go from there. So I don't know.
Makes sense. Professor Gallifrey says in chat, on the same hand, sometimes you need those common descriptors to just show how common and simple something is. Getting back to what Zeph and Johnny were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I'm not saying that you should go full. I mean, that's called purple prose, right? You shouldn't do that all the time. It makes your writing very difficult to read. You kind of have to conserve it.
Use it for very
and
pointed
like when you come to something that like you want to really convey, like in a horror story, you might be using very you might describe a character's everyday routine in a really standard way, but then when like something is wrong, when they notice that there's something seeping out from under the door, then you might go like, how do you convey that in a way that like makes your reader feel the same sort of like kind of unease and fear that your narrator is feeling.
It's all about balance. Everything is about balance.
It's all about balance. All right. I'm trying to see if I can come up with anything that would be really quick answer. I don't know if we do quick answers here.
Something about character.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
Oh yeah, there's a character voice question.
Yeah.
Oh
Sure.
yeah, I really wanted to.
I skipped it initially because this is a world building panel, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I really wanted
that's
to.
fair. That's fair.
One thing about writing characters' voice is specifically when it's a fanfic about a MCYT YouTuber. Use this as an opportunity to watch the MCY YouTuber.
Oh,
yes.
Put the person you are going to write to play and listen to it. Like, not only watch it as a form of entertainment, but take it as a study. Look at the stutters, look at the words they repeat. I will never forget the day I was doing a appointment and I needed to write Cub Fun for a scene. I had never watched Cub Fun before. I need you all to imagine me in the waiting room,
Oh my goodness.
basically blind because I had like a thing in my eyes, listening to Cub Fun season 8 because I needed to get his speaking pattern for a fanfic. Okay.
No, that's exactly how you do it. Yeah, I mean, specifically because you're talking about characters that already exist. Yeah, you just go to their videos, you listen a lot, you pay attention to how they talk, words they use. I know there's also a cheat doc somewhere out there. I can try to find the link.
Yes.
that of people that have taken down notes of this person stutters a lot, this person uses these words as filler sounds and these words as, sentence openers. And yeah, the more you listen, the more used to that voice you'll become, and the easier it'll be to do that voice, that character voice. And when you're rereading your stuff, you can really like close your eye. Well, not close your eyes because you're reading, but picture it in your head and try to hear their voice in your head and see if it sounds right with them saying it. That's generally how I landed.
I have a really sorry, Snake, go.
Sorry, I have a really specific tip. This is just my approach, and it's short. Find a single player series that the person in question has done and watch that. It gives you a good idea of how they act on their own, and if you may be having unconventional combinations. Let's say, like, I don't know, long regretful pause, Jimmy Solidarity, and further long regretful pause, TFC, for example, who I assume never interacted. So yeah, watching both of those two solo will give you a much better idea of how to get them to interact. And if I may shout out a specific series, and you all know it's coming, if you're gonna write Corrales, go watch Corrales' Subnautica. Do it.
I Leo.
Whoa, okay.
I received the same exact tip, I think 15 times at the long of the years.
Snake continues to insist, when in doubt, more Corrales.
Fair enough.
The thing about writing fanfic for MCYT, a blessing we have, I don't think a lot of people realize it, we have so many source material to research. We have many source material. Imagine people who write fanfic to movies, to something that came like once. You have 1 and 30 minutes of footage of this person speaking, and that's it. We have so many source material to research. Like, fanfic is for you. You are not obligated to do your research if you don't want, because fanfic is something to be fun. But if you can do it, watch a Hermit you never watched it before, or watch a Hermit you watch, but watch it again and in a different way,
I have a really funny anecdote here, which is that every time we write Hermits, I cheat off Johnny's homework. Because the thing is, I have some amount of aphantasia and cannot do the voices in my head thing.
Ooh, okay.
So I can't check my own dialogue. Which means that whenever, and I can't like remember the voices that a hermit has. I can't remember how they talk. I can't picture it in my head. So I'll get like, I'll watch them and I'll get like some guidance from that in terms of like pacing and tone. But after that, I'm like, I make Johnny write the dialogue first if I've never written a hermit before, so I can cheat off her, because she has an excellent eye for this. So basically what I'm saying is, if you can't do it, store-bought is fine, get a writing partner.
All right. I'm confident in my dialogue, and I still send it to friends to be like, hey, does this sound, I do this right, does this sound like this guy? Yeah.
Alright, if anyone has...
friendship with Snake started because I decided, okay, I'm gonna write Corrales. Looks at my blank screen. Snake, is this Corrales? I am doing right. Can I get some brownie points? Pretty please help.
Hello, friends. We are coming up on 2 p.m. Does anyone have like one more sentence they want to say?
Have fun.
Right.
Have fun.
You must. Yeah, that's the single.
Just write it, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it never sees the light of day, just write whatever you feel like writing and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Do what sparks joy, and you will make something good.
That's true.
Silly with it. Go crazy. Have
Even
fun.
if it's silly, even if it's a crazy concept, just do it.
Someone will read it.
Exactly.
Yeah.